Yo, what is going on, my fellow weebs? Krono here, and welcome back to the channel. So today I'm actually going to be going over well, basically we're doing a new type of video. Earlier in the week, I asked you guys to leave some questions, and I'll be going through and answering all of them. Essentially, I wanted to do something where either bi-weekly or weekly or monthly, we kind of do a bit of a roundup where I take all the questions from you guys and more or less just go through and answer them. Whether they be about PSO2, whether it be about personal life, or whatever it happens to be, just kind of taking some time to have a conversation with you guys. Especially since I want to continue making content in the future moving forward, I feel like this is going to be something that's going to be super cool to have at the ground level and see how it grows with us. Disclaimer, this is not my original idea. As most of you guys know me from my past, I did play a lot of Final Fantasy XIV, and a very prevalent member of the community over in 14, Mr. Happy, has a weekly show that he does Mondays with Mr. Happy, which honestly I thought was really cool, and it was a great idea. So, not that I think he watches any of these videos, but yeah, Mike, if you do, I kind of stole this from you. We'll call it Questions with Krono or something. I don't know, man. Listen, this is payback for the whole Korno thing. It's now followed me into PSO2, just so you know. So if you ever see this video, just know that this is your fault. Anyway, so I made 2 posts about this, essentially letting you guys know you can ask any questions. Gave about 5 days to see what you guys would have, and there are a couple questions in here that I feel like we can talk about. It's not gonna be a super long video, of course, and as these get longer, we'll have better forums for you guys to submit questions. Maybe we'll add something in Discord that you guys can pop into and leave your questions there, and we can go through and answer all of them. I can gather them all. But for now, I'm just going to go through the community posts and we'll see what we've got. All right, let's go ahead and jump over to it. So this is the first post that I made. Let's take a look at the questions and see what we've got in store. Let's see, do we start with the, no, I don't know. Okay. Let's start at the very top. So are you happy with the current state of gearing and progression, or is there some changes you'd like to see? I'm assuming this is in relation to PSO2, of course. So the current state of gearing and progression works for me as a player who's kept up with the game consistently, but I haven't personally gone back and touched, free-to-play Krono or made a character from scratch. And as it stands, I don't know what to tell a player what to grab as they're going through their leveling process. So I would like to streamline a bit more, whether that be in the quests, maybe involve giving some gear as you're going through the storyline. That way, when you reach the end of the storyline, that gearing process is kind of done. Maybe have quests that have you augment specific things onto your gear. That might be a little difficult because then, of course, players might take advantage of that and sell those augments a little bit more expensively, or maybe they just give you those augments to augment onto your gear. So the early gearing process is a little bit weird for me, that I think could use a bit more work. The end game gearing process at the moment I think is kind of the best it has been in quite some time. A lot of players like to complain that quests don't really give you enough, or they don't really reward the amount of time that you put into them. However, as it currently stands, a lot of the quests that we have in NGS do give us small pieces of what we need to make some of the best augments in the game. And if you're paying attention to doing each different type of content, you actually end up having pieces of what you need to get most things taken care of. A lot of players don't realize that if they just took some time or invested in some dual quest gear, they're probably sitting on millions and millions of Meseta that they could be combining into capsules and selling, but they just aren't. Because either they haven't done dual quests or they just haven't noticed they could be combining these things together. So as it stands, it's all right. We need more with the release of LC augments. Those are pretty cool. I mean, when a new unit comes out, it kind of just, I don't want to say it dwarfs the old unit usually, but newer units with higher potency tend to overwrite older units. Some newer event gear has also, made it so it kind of cut through the leveling process, right? Our current, our most recent event weapon is level 40, and that weapon is actually insanely cracked for the leveling process. Once you reach that point, you're basically done with getting a weapon until you go make a Verschmelz. So it's kind of crazy how that ends up working out. Maybe that was done intentionally. Maybe that's the idea moving forward, but I don't know, it just seemed a bit weird overall. End game portion of it, of course, is kind of okay. I think it's fine for the most part. you more or less have a pretty solid way of getting yourself into the seal exploration, and then you have a fairly solid way of gearing yourself from a seal exploration. It does require a bit of a grind, but I mean, that's really what you want to grind in for the most part, either that or the LTQ if you've got a group to grind it with. Funny enough, if you're grinding the LTQ, you actually want to be a bit more geared than you would for LCE. LCE tends to be a little bit easier right now than the current LTQ, though that might change with next week's update, since LTQs do rotate and change. They do tend to be really good farming methods though, so either way, get yourself a group and get going. It's pretty solid. As far as what I'd like to see, the drop rates on current Tissa weapons are too high. Too low. I personally believe there needs to be a lottery weapon out there to get players to like want to farm towards it. That weapon does need to be stronger than the farmable weapon, but that means that weapon needs to exist because a farmable weapon exists, right? Because once you have the farmable weapon, what's the point in going after the bigger weapon, right? So if you can get it, you can sell it, or if you want to use it, so on and so forth. Those who have that level of money can absolutely go that route. It's kind of up to them, but it's, you know, it depends on the individual on how you decide to go about this process itself. All that to be said, I do like where it currently is, but there's small tweaks that need to be made, some changes with where certain drops are at, so on and so forth. Have you played a game outside of your usual genre and gotten hooked by it? Huh. Game outside of my usual genre and gotten hooked by it. What game would I think of that's outside of my usual? It's hard to say what I play MMOs, I play RPGs. I mean, I guess Destiny was probably the closest because I don't really play FPS. When I played Overwatch for a small stint, I got hooked by it pretty well. But, you know, we know how Overwatch turned. It's tough because I kind of keep my genre kind of broad. If I have character customization, team-based gameplay, RPG elements, all of those things are kind of things that I look at anyway. So it's tough to say. I can't really say offhand like there's just one definitive game like this is different and I know it's outside of my norm and I've been hooked by it. I think the closest thing I've had to that so far, and I can't even really say it's completely outside my genre, is the new My Hero game. It's really fun. I just really suck at it, and it sucks to suck at something. It doesn't feel good, so I need to put some more practice into it and see how I feel. Hopefully that answers your question. I'm sorry, I can't really think of anything else outside of that. Do you think NGS has become too easy? I don't think Phantasy Star has ever been a game that's all that difficult to begin with. People like to argue that, you know, base PSO2 is more difficult, but most people just didn't know how to play base PSO2. Even going back to PSU, the difficulty there was mostly RNG. You didn't really have a dash, you didn't really have a block mechanic back in that time. Whether or not you block something or whether or not something would kill you in some cases was all left to your stats and RNG. You sometimes would block, other times you would just be one shot by like a specific spell called Majid, or I think some enemies ended up having a killer shot as well back then. But yeah, there was just certain things that you didn't really, like, you had to work within the limitations of the game itself. So I think there are parts of it that is simpler, yes. Are there parts that are less annoying? For sure. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think the difficulty exists where it needs to exist, and for a game to really thrive, you have to remember that a lot of players aren't looking for difficulty, they're just looking for fun. And for some people that's the same thing, but not for everyone. I know for me, something more difficult is more fun, even if I'm like raging at it essentially, but I'm enjoying myself more. For other people, that's a huge turnoff, and it's a huge off-putting situation, and we have to kind of keep that in mind. Realistically, the game should be designed for in 90% the casual player base, and maybe, I would even say not even 95% the casual player base, and maybe 5% the hardcore player base. Realistically is how a game should be designed. It's just that 5% needs to be good. If it's not, then it feels pretty bad. Don't know what to ask. You don't have to ask questions if you don't have anything. I'm curious, is Skull's a gremlin in disguise? This question is going to get me. She's watching this video right now. She's gonna get up out of her chair, come find me. She's gonna beat me up because of you. I just want you to know that, Purple. No, she's not a gremlin in disguise. She's actually a real anime girl When she gets it from the computer, you guys don't see her. When she does like, you know, her what is it, her old face cam Fridays, like, you know, where she would do IRL face cam, that was actually just that was a disguise that she would put on to make it seem like she was a real person. She's actually just an anime girl. Gunner good. Gunner is actually good. Gunner's in a weird spot. I personally believe Gunner's damage is in a very awkward position. Like, when I look at Gunner, I think to myself that Gunner realistically, the way it should work, not the way that it does work, but the way it should work in my opinion, is if they want to put so much into chain, your SROL arts shouldn't be so hamstrung in a lot of situations by its range. They should be the best way to build your chain. The only reason you should ever be pressing PAs, in my opinion, is either if it's needed in specific AoE situations or niche cases, or if you're detonating a chain, or if, you know, you're dealing with a small lag time between chains. And other than that, you're just building PP. So I think SROL arts and PA should be the primary like rotation or gameplay loop for Gunner, in my opinion. But as it stands, that's not always the case. Like, you're pressing some PAs to build your chains and things like that, and it just feels very weird to me. I think it's kind of disconnected. But if they want to focus so much on chain, I think that's how it should work, regardless of how it does work. And I'm sure you guys might have heard Finn. He decided he wanted to be in the video. Apologies. But all that to say is Gunner's not bad, but it's also not great. It still needs some work. It's still very awkward. There's still some weird interactions with chain in the game that exist. Like, what is the one I'm thinking of? There's one where building chain to max actually still affects other things outside of just the Gunner themselves. Like drop kicks from those little double pads in the current LTQ. Those are affected by having chain at 100, which is ridiculous. That makes Gunner one of the best classes for this Arcs record. And other things. Basically, anything the Gunner can do is affected mostly by chain, which is kind of wild. As long as it doesn't include a weapon, it's affected by chain, which is pretty insane. So yeah, Gunner I think is all right. I don't think it's great, but I don't think it's bad either. Let's go take a look at the other posts. So we've got a few questions here. Shooting some ideas out. What's the story behind how you met Skulls through Phantasy Star? How'd you come to be a fan of all manner of dual wielding blades? What precisely is your top 3 favorite aspects about NGS? Clock. Yes. Yup, clock. For those guys who don't know, I started in Alliance in Unship 2 in NGS. We are Clock Tower. Our Yup clock is the message you see when you log in. Clocks for life. Anyway, if you guys want to join, feel free to let me know. I made an entire video talking about it, so you guys can check that out on the channel. Just scroll through, you'll find it. So first off, what's the story of how you met Skulls through Phantasy Star? Funny enough, this actually was a tiered process. I was going to talk about this during we're doing like an NGS wedding basically, because I did ask her to marry me and she did say yes, which is awesome. So she's now my fiance. But how it ended up happening was I was dragged into like a fashion show. C1, another creator, or Chris One, if you guys know him, or Agent Chris One, however you know him, or Agent C1, all different names. He was running a community fashion show where he had some community members as judges, and he had Yosha from Ship 4, if you guys don't know him, Spook Yosha, was a part of that group. Well, Yosha messaged me and was like, hey, they're doing this community fashion show, you want in? And at the time, like, the scene wasn't huge. It was still fairly smaller, close-knit, and there were a few people in the community that were a bit bigger, and I didn't know who all was going to it, who all was a part of it or whatever. So I was like, you know what, I know I have a pretty decent size in the community itself. I want to bring something to this platform. I think it's kind of cool that they're putting this sort of stuff together. I don't even have to do anything. I can just show up and help out. So you know what, dude, I'm down. Let's go. So Yosha invites me to go with. At the time, we're like, we can get more people. So I call up or I message Caro, like, yo, Caro, you should come with as well. And, we go and we check out this fashion show, right? Well, Skulls was already there with a few other people. And what was it that happened that kind of just... So at the end of the fashion show, it was Skulls and another creator at the time just decided to do this very, very, like, how can I put it? Sensual, is that the word? I don't know, but this ara, right? that just like, when I tell you it hit your boy, it hit your boy like a sack of bricks. Okay, it's like, oh, too much. Anyway, since then, we had just like, we talked randomly in the background a couple of times here and there, and there was a day that I was just like, I was having a really rough day, like a really bad day, man. Like to the point where like I even posted something on Twitter, and I never post like at the time I'd never post how I felt personally on my Twitter account. For me, it was all about my stream, all about my content, and I didn't want you guys to have to deal with that, so I never posted about it. And I did. And out of everyone who like just checked up on, Krono the creator, Skulls checked up on like Krono the person to make sure that I was okay. And like from then we kind of just clicked. We talked for a long time, and I kind of just went from there. Funny enough, the first time I ever talked to Skulls though was a little bit of a different story. This is like a bonus story. And she will probably kill me for telling you guys this. So at the time, she was more so of a numbers person. Like she was kind of getting into the PSO2 space, getting into the streaming space. And like when you're working on this sort of stuff and you're basically your own manager, you look at like statistics and what other people are doing, so on and so forth. And I guess at the time, that's when I was just streaming a ton of PSO2. I was like one of two people that was basically crushing every category as like number one when it came to streaming PSO2. Is when it was like really popping off. It was like me and then GM. And GM really wasn't even playing that much at the time. It was mostly me at the time, but I'm just crushing every single statistic. And I remember still to this day, Skull showed up in my chat and was like, "You're my rival," or something to that effect. And I didn't understand what was going on at the time. So I was like, is this like a Soaring Blades thing? Because people have done this before with like, I'm gonna be a better Soaring Blades main than you, or so on and so forth. And I was like, all right, cool, man. Whatever. I just like the weapon type. And that's all there was to it. Like that was pretty much it. It was kind of funny, but it was just like that interaction was before everything else. And funny enough, I didn't even remember that interaction until after Skulls and I started talking more. So pretty crazy. There's other stories and stuff like that I can tell you guys about that are pretty funny. Some of that will be reminded, some of you guys will be reminded of because they actually happened on stream. But it's a good time. I'm very happy that I was able to find my soulmate through PSO2 of all things. Kind of crazy. How did you become a fan? A fan of all manner of dual wielding blades. Funny enough, my choice when it comes to weaponry, originally way back was greatsword. I liked big old swords, and that was primarily because of. Hang on, let me see if I can find it. One sec. Here we go. It's because of this guy, Guanping. I remember playing Dynasty Warriors back in the day, and I absolutely loved this character. I loved his weapon type. I thought it was super cool. He held it like behind him with like one hand and stuff. Like I thought that was sick. Realistically, this was just an exaggerated version of a halberd. Is what this actually was. I think it was a Zweihander? I can't remember exactly what they called them, but like this was mostly what got me into liking the great swords and things like that at the time. And then afterwards, I actually kind of let me close this. I kind of shied away from great swords and I moved over to liking bow. And funny enough, the reason I ended up liking bow was because of Fate. At the time, a friend of mine was a huge Fate fan, and he showed me a character named Archer, and I was like, dude, this guy is sick. He's super cool. He turned swords into arrows, and that's what I got from the character, and that's what I rolled with, and I just kept going with it. And I thought bows were just the bee's knees. To the point at the time, for those of you guys who play Monster Hunter, I played Freedom Unite all the way through with bow only, and actually beat the game to the point where you had to to beat some of the final bosses and the post-game stuff, who was it? Giant crab, giant dragon, I can't remember. I know Lao Shao was the giant dragon. Shen something maybe was the giant crab. And then there was that giant flying balloon thing. I can't remember its name at right now. Either way, and those bosses themselves, super difficult to fight. A lot of them multiplayer scaled, because back then, if you weren't playing with a group of friends, doing some of the guild missions, like the guild stuff, was scaled to 4 people, regardless of how many people you had there with you at the time. So to do enough damage to complete these quests was absolutely ridiculous. And you had to basically rely on a skill called Adrenaline, which you essentially say at low HP and you had a massive damage buff. I had to use that specifically to be able to do enough damage on bow, because bow back then was not amazing for damage. And I also didn't know damage formulas that well either, so it might have been even better, but I might have just been playing wrong. But yeah, so it was bow for a very long time. And then my friend showed me what Archer actually was, and I was like, hold on, this is even cooler. So I don't know why, but it just kind of clicked. Dual wielding just kind of seemed awesome. Having an extra sword all the time seemed cool. A sword in each hand I thought was awesome. I mean, obviously those who watched SAO watched SAO. I actually read the light novel for SAO, so I enjoyed what they showed for Kirito, but dude, the first season of SAO was like good and bad. Part one first season, and then it just went all downhill after that. If any of you guys do watch any SAO or any SAO fans in general, or if you ever saw it and you were like, dude, this is awful, go watch Progressive. Please do yourself a favor. Either actually watch Progressive and also skip ahead and watch War on Underworld. Actually just watch that whole thing in general. Watch all of the Alicization stuff. Watch all of that. All of that is really, really good. It goes far beyond just Kirito and things like that. And they even go as far as to Kirito's out of the mix for so long that you just think to yourself at a certain point, I'm like, Jesus Christ, show up again. So there's a lot, and it's really cool. So of course, as every dual wield fan goes, I don't completely hate the character. I understand why people do, but awesome. Either way. And what precisely are your 3 favorite aspects about NGS? 3 favorite aspects about NGS. The combat. Some people like to, kind of diss the combat itself. I do enjoy the combat, even though I have issues with my favorite weapon. The combat there aren't many games that are like NGS when it comes to combat. They try to be, but they're not. And it kind of in a league all its own in this space specifically. So I enjoy the combat. As much as we kind of get screwed over by the dev team, unfortunately, when it comes to this, the fashion is kind of bar none. You really don't see very many games that go this far when it comes to fashion. And yes, it's from an aspect of making money in some cases, but also it's just really good. And the last thing, so I'm going to use base game as my thought process for this. I know you said NGS, but where the story is going. I played through all of base PSO2 story, and I remember the same feelings I had back then are the feelings I'm having now, where I'm like, something feels like something's happening, but it's not quite there yet, and I feel kind of disconnected still a little bit. And they've progressively gotten me more and more connected to the storyline. So my third one is anticipation for the story, because base PSO2 also did the same thing and then knocked it out of the park. And it may be unfair to judge it heavily based on that, but I've seen what Sega does with the Phantasy Star storylines. This happened to me for Phantasy Star Universe. It happened for Portable 2 Infinity, for base PSO2. I'm just expecting the same thing to happen again in NGS, so we'll see how it goes. If you had the chance to rebuild how Soaring Blades plays from the ground up, what would you do? Damage balancing as secondary to flow and feel. It's kind of almost already there. If I was going to give it the easiest changes, the easiest thing I would do is reduce the amount of damage your counter does whenever you block, and make it so you can block consistently. If you press the weapon action button, you block. If you spam weapon action and you don't block anything, you lose a bit of damage. So it needs to be balanced in that sort of way. I know you said, secondary to flow and feel, but Soaring Blades already has really good PAs. They already do very good damage. But the problem is that we don't get to finish most of them. And you're so incentivized to step counter everything, even to the point where you want to block step counter, called BAPS, that if you don't, it sucks. Even when you have to, it sucks. And anyone who's forced to really dislikes it. So remove that as a concept altogether by just making block good, by making it not, first off, making it so you can't BAPS. I know there are people out there that actually like BAPS. I don't know what's wrong with you. Maybe seek help. You shouldn't devalue yourself in such a way. I'm just messing. I dislike BAPS a lot, man. As a concept. And anyone who doesn't know what BAPS is, it's Blade Arts Parry Step Counter. It's basically some attacks in NGS that have long enough active frames that you can not only block, but after your block is completed, you're still within damage of the ability itself, and you can step counter the damage as well. So you get a Blade Arts Parry and a step counter, aka BAPS. But it varies depending upon the attack. The timing can be very tight, and the timing also changes depending upon the PA that you're using at the time that you use the block. So it's extraordinarily irritating for most people that are doing any form of optimization. But yeah, if I had the choice, I would pretty much just do that. That's the easy option. If I was going to be rebuilding it from the ground up, maybe make something like Fanatic Blade provide the effect that Jupiter Tullus used to back in base PSO2, which was you would shoot out blades whenever you used PAs, which incentivized more PA use. If I was like, I want a specific playstyle for soaring blades that it doesn't have, I want Katana's playstyle for soaring blades. I don't care if our PAs were much shorter and we had kind of like a combo to our PAs. Katana has probably one of the coolest combinations when it comes to PAs, between its weapon action and how the PAs work and how they flow together. Like, it's insane to me. So if I had a choice to build it from the ground up, I would shorten our PAs, kind of rebalance the damage, make it so instead of like a block, we had some form of like parry counter, and yeah, just go from there. But we would basically just be Katana with an extra Katana, which wouldn't be very fair. So I think the first option of just fixing block and making it not crap would be much better to deal with, in my opinion. Could you make an NGS, PS2 NGS guide, like a starter guide for 2023? I've been toying around with that idea. I might make it for 2024, I don't know yet, but I would need to basically go back and redo the beginning of the game to get a better feel of how things are at the very start. If you're ever curious, I did do a free-to-play series where I played through the game from the very start, but things have changed. So I think I may need to go back and revisit that and see how that works out. At the current state of NGS, how would you feel if Sega just said F it and brought back sound classes? So we did just recently react to one of Kathy's videos talking about sound classes coming back to PSO2 NGS. I think it depends on how sound classes would be introduced. I like the idea of classes evolving into sound classes, though what happens to Slayer? Since Slayer is basically just lighter luster. I don't think it would be the best way of doing things, but I think it'd be okay to bring back sounds at this point. I just want more variety in classes. I know some people are like, well, bring back, class diversity and variety and build diversity. NGS has never had build diversity. Base PSO2 has never had build diversity. I don't know who's been lying to these people. That's not a thing. There was the right choice and there was every other choice. I hate to say it. Maybe that's mean, but that's realistically what it was, if we're being honest. Creating diversity would be, I think, a much larger undertaking. You would need to make playstyles that actually matched each other. The diversity comes in your class choice and your weapon choice, not your build choice. Hate to say that, but that's kind of how the game is currently balanced. What was your first free-to-play MMORPG and how was the experience? My first free-to-play MMORPG. Let's see. First free-to-play MMORPG. Give me a minute. I gotta see if I can remember the name of this. Okay. So it was either RuneScape or it was this. Like, I want to say RuneScape was my first, but like my first impactful free-to-play MMORPG was probably Pristine Tale. How was the experience? I spent hours upon days of playing this game. The grind was ridiculous. I made basically every single type of character I could, and then me being the young boy I was at the time, just completely would abandon these characters when they got to a point where grinding was too difficult for me. I think it was like around level 30 at the time or something like that, and I would just make a new character, and I would try a different character, and I'd make other characters, and I'd try other characters. And waste tons of money in game and all kinds of craziness because I wanted some of the best gear I could get during the leveling process. It was insane at the time, man. I had a good time. I played hours upon hours, so it had quite the lasting effect. I used to grinding mobs and doing quests and, dealing with death and things of that sort in game, so on and so forth. But if not Pristine Tale, I would say RuneScape. And as far as its effect on me, the experience overall, I just had a really good time. It showed me that I did like investing my time in games. It showed me that I liked kind of having that self-insert for a character. I personally just never got behind creating characters that I just didn't like the look of. And it made it really difficult for me to play certain classes, especially in Pristine Tale, because there was not a lot of character customization in that game. And your armor mostly looked the same for everyone. When you got to a certain point, it was kind of like, if you guys know what it looks like to gear up in a lot of really, really crappy mobile games now, where like you put on armor and like it just kind of gets a little bit bulkier and it changes a little bit each time. Like that's what Pristine Tale did. And it was, oh man, it was a good time, but we had different tastes back then, let's put it that way. And then as far as RuneScape goes, I went from being scammed to scamming people to grinding to all kinds of stupidness in the time. Everything you experience in RuneScape, I experienced at the time. So, and this was, this was post, not old school, this is post classic RuneScape. So what the game was after classic is when I played. And yeah, it was a little rough, but I had a good time. I enjoyed myself. What was the first game that you ever played? First game that you played? First game I ever played. Duck Hunt. Duck Hunt on an old an old Nintendo, old Super Nintendo. What is Super? Dude, hang on. Okay, I just had to make sure it was the right game. It was Duck Hunt on the NES. Duck Hunt and Mario, I played in NES back in, it was when I visited my cousins. I would sit holed up in their room and played an NES that my aunt had. We played Duck Hunt and we played like the old Mario game. And then the first game I owned, like that my mom bought for us, was, I want to say, Dr. Mario on the Super Nintendo. And I played that for a while. And that, of course, only goes so far. And then I can think of like the first impactful game that I really played, like that I personally owned. Oh, what was it? Brave Fencer Musashi on the PlayStation. Yeah. If I'm thinking back, like that was probably one of the ones where I was like, this is it. Like, video games are awesome. It was definitely Brave Fencer Musashi. Hold on, drinking coffee as well. Like that was it for me. I was pretty much hooked by that point. And it looks like that's all the questions we have today. Thank you guys to everyone who submitted questions. I will be doing this again maybe next week as well. We might do this every week. I kind of like this. The video was kind of long, but I didn't realize we had so many good questions. And of course, I'm a long-winded individual, so it probably didn't help. Thanks to everyone who submitted questions. If you guys have any questions of your own, I would say feel free to toss in the comments below. But I would hold off and wait for these posts. I will try to make a mention of it on Twitter when I post these on my YouTube channel. And then of course I'll make a mention of it in Discord as well for you guys. And I'm still going to work out how we're going to do these so you guys can submit questions moving forward. But I think this is super fun. Anyway, guys, remember that you can submit questions not only about PSO2, but any other games that we're playing or just my life in general. I'll be more than happy to talk with you guys about it. Finn also wanted to be part of the outro itself. Hey buddy, where you at? Come here. Come here, Finn. Finn has decided to come visit and wants pets and the outro. Anyway, guys, keep an eye out for these posts. Let me know what you guys, what your answers maybe were to some of these questions. I'm curious what your guys' favorite, first video games were, your favorite moments of PSO2. If you met your SO via PSO2, like how that happened for you, I'm curious to see. Love to read through these in the questions below, or in the comments below. Either way, like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want to keep up with more, and I'll see you all next time. Take care, everyone. Peace out. Also, Finn says goodbye too. Later.